Now on table number 5, the PHC opens with a hijack. Not too much information on him after 150 hands, except for he's running pretty loose aggressive at 22-14, and I think he's only folded like to 2 out of 6 3-bets at this point. So, can't go wrong with just kind of getting ace king in a spot like this. Can't think of too many great reasons to flat other than to keep the button in, who might be a pretty weak player. So we like to go ahead and 3-bet that pre-flop. And then on table number 1, so we bet 54 into 80, which is kind of like just like a standard turn size for me. I don't want to make it like against good players. I don't want to make it too small or too large so that it's going to be transparent as to what my hand is. And we get a few cool things going on here. So I'll adjust table number 1 first, since we're already talking about that. When he raises his turn, since I said that he's likely to have fast played his good hands on the flop, I don't think he's going to show up with hands that are better than ace-10 all that often. And his sizing also made me believe that he was going to show up with a draw here just like an absurd amount of the time. And the reason is because his turn raise is massive. Like 3x is really, really, really big relative to like the amount of money that we have in left in our stacks. So he's really just like committing himself here, it looks like, with a lot of draws. Which I think is something that you're going to see a lot in these games as well, where people make these massive turn raises on draws. So they're like trying to, they're clearly committing themselves, but they're looking like they're trying to, I don't know, raise a set because the board is really draw heavy. Or they're not shoving, they're not flatting, or they're not raising small because they want to kind of like maximize their fold equity by betting a little bit larger, I guess, and because maybe a shove would look too strong. So when he makes like a really large raise here, it looks like he's just like raise calling a draw, and that was kind of what I put him on. I thought like if he had a king queen hand that he floated, he'd be more likely to just flat call this turn and look to elicit river bluffs from me or something. Plus maybe he thinks that he couldn't get in against worst if he raised like king queen on this turn as well. So I'm kind of putting him on a draw a lot when he raises. My options were to obviously call the turn and then look to bluff catch rivers. Although I think like if I call here, there's going to be about $400 in the pot, and we're going to have 200 left in our stacks. I didn't think he'd be like super likely to just suicide bluff the river if I called the turn, and I thought since he was raising a lot of draws and just committing himself, well, if I shoved, he would just call with that draw, and that I'd be more than happy to see that. So on table number 1, I just decided to shove for value and expect to see a whole bunch of draws. On table number 5, obviously just going to get ace king suited in pre-flop. But I wanted to take a quick second to talk about the PHC sizing here. Now, I don't know too much about him, so maybe this is like his normal 4-bet size. I'm not really sure. And against unknowns, it's very plausible that they just 4-bet to 3x, and it could even be with very strong hands because, that's a quote-unquote standard re-raise size. So I don't know. This could just be his norm to make it like 3 times my 3-bet. Although what I will say is that when they make it 3 times, it's very, very hard for them to ever be bluffing here because he's pretty much committed himself. And a lot of times, like if weaker regulars or players like that in general make a large 4-bet, you're going to see hands that are sort of like quote-unquote vulnerable or don't want to take a flop a lot. So when he made it, like my initial impression of this raise size was that he was going to have ace queen, ace king, or some like small to medium pocket pair a lot, like pocket eights. And not necessarily a hand like 2 king. So I thought I was actually getting it in real good on table number 5, and it's just something I thought I'd mention. And actually, right at around this time, my monitor randomly froze on me, and I couldn't move my mouse or anything like that, and it was driving me nuts. And you'll see like what happens is like I end up like my mouse just goes dead still, and I start time banking, and I almost end up timing out on table number 1, and then. In case you missed it on table number 5, we do get in against 9s pre-flop, which is kind of what I was expecting to see, and we bank the ace and chip the pot. And now you'll see me freaking out because I can't move my mouse and I'm timing down. And we have a big sweat to see if I can get back to table number 1 in time, which we do. Anyways, last second we're able to shove all in with ace-10, and we get a snap fold. So one other thing that I probably forgot to mention was that like this personal experience with the Guak is that he's also very likely to just like randomly bluff raise this turn. So maybe he floated like a gut shot or pocket eights, and he just decides to bluff raise the king turn. I've seen him do stuff like that quite a bit, and we have like relevant history where he's like 3-bet bluffed the flop and committed with like Jack 10 offsuit on two-tone coordinated boards against me and things like that. So I probably forgot to mention that like not only did I expect to see a draw a lot when he raised his 3x on the turn, but with him there's like a legitimate chance that I see absolutely nothing and he just folds. On table number 5, we ISO the early position limper with 2 kings and the weaker player on our left cold calls. Just going to go ahead and c-bet this flop as I would, which would kind of be my standard with 2 kings on this board. And go ahead and open my button with 9-10 offsuit on table number 4. So we c-bet with kings, and Bucky Dave goes ahead and makes a, I guess a normal size to whatever size raise on the flop. I think when weaker players raise on these boards, I would almost always say that this is like committing here, like he's raising to get all in. So like there's not as much merit in say like flatting kings in order to elicit bluffs on later streets. I think a lot of times when he raises his flop, he's just trying to get on with whatever he has. So if I want to continue with kings, I think shoving is probably best. And a little bit of relevant history that I have with him was before I hit the record button, he had been raising a bunch of my c-bets and a bunch of c-bets in general. We played a pot where like he raised me on some two-tone connected board where I flopped the pair in a straight draw. I called. The turn went check check, and then he just like jammed the river for 4 times pot, which was pretty weird. But he's also raising a lot of c-bets. If you look, it's 29% after 78 hands. So I think that means he's probably raised what, like 2 out of 7 opportunities, or 4 out of 14. Is that math right? I think that's pretty close to right. So he's definitely like shown that he's got like a little bit of a propensity to raise c-bets. So definitely makes me way more likely to want to stack like a good overpair against him, because I'm going to see even hands like 10 jack that he might just like raise for information and call a shove with, putting me on a draw or a queen or some type of draw. So I'm just going to be shoving on table number 5 and actually feeling pretty good about it given what I know about this player. On table number 1, when check 2, just going to take like a little stab at it with queen 4 offsuit. I think you just get an absurd number of folds here from weaker players. So stabbing once, and then usually like on a paired dry board like this, just giving up on call will be okay. Might even have like a 3-outer with my queen. And then on board number 4 with 9-10, just going to c-bet when the weaker player checks me on this board. Again, kind of looking to give up against them. Like I think for the most part without reads, when weak players or anybody in general check calls you on this flop, they're going to show up with top pair or good second pair hand that they don't want to fold. So trying to barrel them off of it without equity isn't going to be like the best play ever. So the plan was to bet this flop and then just kind of be one and done where I give up. And if I turned a straight draw of some sort, a lot of times I'd actually kind of just look to check back, because I think that they're never folding the turn and I'm not going to try and triple barrel them. So I just want to realize my equity by checking back that turn, and maybe I bink and they have 2 pair or something. So as for sizing, 16 into 26, especially against weaker players and in general in these dry ace-high boards, can't think of any reason why I'd want to bet like full pot. So just naming my own price on my bluff and betting a little bit smaller is going to be more than okay there. And obviously the 3 is pretty much a huge brick for us, and we're just going to give up. So with kings, eventually decide to jam all in. And on board number 1, we get led into on the river when we make our full house, and I think raising here is like completely acceptable. I mean, there's times where he just had some random peel on the flop where he's like going to bet call for the chop. He might call an ace, and 7 is not only unlikely. It's not only unlikely that he has a 7, but it's like if I make it, I think I make it 52 here. If I make it 52 and he makes it 150 or shoves all in, it's not like I have a real decision. I mean, it's a pretty easy fold. He's always going to show me a 7. So I can raise for value in a spot like this, where it's just going to be a very, very easy raise fold against a weaker player. And then on table number 5, we jam. We see ace queen, which we get it in way ahead of, and we hold. So a whole bunch of moderately interesting hands, I guess, to start the session off. King queen offsuit, I go ahead and open here in middle position. First of all, the players left act behind me. As you can see, a lot of them are weaker on the tighter side of things. And we've got that player in the big blind who limp called under the gun earlier, so I'm going to assume that he might not be the best poker player out there.